Hello and welcome to the Gooner. Back again with you guys for another show, for another episode of our tactical breakdown report series, in which every month we have a look at the players that are on loan and also look at the youth side. And that today is exactly what we're going to do. I'm joined by Kev, aka Scouting Indoors, aka Next Generation Arsenal. How you doing, mate? Are you well?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here as always.
No problem at all. I've just spotted the little Emirates Stadium sign hiding in the background. So a little bit of Arsenal in the room,
Yeah,
which is great. How have you been, though?
I've been great, thanks. I've just moved house, so I've got everything in boxes. So I thought I need to have something Arsenal related in the background. So I just sort of found this on the top of the box.
Lovely stuff. How's the move going? It going well? All settled?
It's gone really well. Yeah, all settled. Just still sort of living out of boxes as you do. It'll probably be that way for about 2-3 years, but
generally, I'm pretty sure there's still boxes here that I've done yet to open. Anyway, of course, this is our report show in which we look at the monthly kind of cycle. As I say, we'll be covering players like William Saliba, and we'll be covering his September on Friday. We'll be covering the likes of Reece Nelson, if he ever plays, because he hasn't played at all for Feyenoord since moving there. Miguel Aziz is a similar situation at Portsmouth, has only played one game there. But whilst there's some difficulties with our loanees, there isn't many difficulties with our youth side right now, because they are absolutely smashing it after a very, very weird opening to the season in which they got drubbed 6-1 by West Ham. Have got an amazing run of results and have got some really good results, especially against Manchester City, the obvious favourites for the league, and went there and got a 2-2 draw. Kev, just give me kind of your overall feelings about how the season's gone so far.
Well, it started off as a disaster, didn't it? And academy football can be like that sometimes. You get high-scoring games, and sometimes it doesn't really give you the context. And I guess what you're dealing with is players that are at that tender age don't have that resilience, and sort of once things go badly, the floodgates open, and you can end up with that big score line. So, you know, if we look at all the games we've played this season, there's been some quite big score lines, whether we've won or lost. And I think there was a lot of context behind that first game. I think West Ham played a really, really experienced, older side. I think they had the likes of Yarmolenko in there, and Lanzini, and Ben Johnson, and I'm sure there was another senior player they had in there that made the difference. And what we know of our under-23s is they're quite a young side. So I think it was quite a mismatch physically, and they grounded us down, and it ended up being a heavy loss. And I had a lot of sympathy, because Kevin Betsy he wasn't really in charge at that point. He'd sort of just walked through the door and had to kind of take a heavy loss on the chin, which he did. And then I think he got back to, you know, spending some time on the training ground and getting to know his players, and getting to sort of put his system in place, which has been a sort of 3-5-2, 3-4-3 hybrid, which has given the team a lot of stability, I think, and it's allowed for players to it's allowed for him to see what players' strengths and weaknesses are, and it's given us that stability at the back, which has allowed us to sort of stop shipping goals, which is we did a lot of last season, and we started to do that in the first game as well. And since then, it's really taken off, and we've been on fire. We've been fantastic, and some of the big reasons for that, I think, is the midfield trio of Akinola, Patino, Salah-Eddin, who are brilliant together, and they've been an integral part of that upturn in results, which has seen some big score lines. You know, we've beaten Palace 4-2, Chelsea 6-1, and we've had some fantastic results against big teams. You know, United, City, Chelsea, Spurs, which has all been very pleasing to go and win those big games. And you know, we've had Balogun in there, which does make a difference. He's certainly a player that's outgrown senior academy football, so it does make a difference when he's in the side. But generally, I think that midfield trio has been superb, and Charlie Patino being the star that I'm sure we'll talk plenty about. But I think it's been really, really good to watch Betsy implement his style, and it's given a lot of confidence and freedom to the players, and they've been able to express themselves. I think some of the players have really benefited from the change in system and that stability. If you look at the likes of Lopez, Agumbo, and Akinola, they seem to have come into their own a little bit this season, and it's had a real impact on the team. So it's been exciting, really, and exciting to see the impact Kevin Betsy's had.
And he's like new, isn't he, of course, and a lot of people will not know much about him. Took over from Steve Bold, was involved in the England setup, and as you said, took that 6-1 loss on the chin, absolutely, and just moved forward and implemented this 3 at the back system, which wasn't, as far as I'm aware, used under Bold, and that's suited, as you say, like the likes of Lopez, that likes to get forwards and doesn't have as many responsibilities defensively because he's got that additional defender behind him. And then it's weird because when you think of a 3 at the back system, you don't tend to think of it as having a front 2. You always think of it as more of a 3-4-3 style system. So the additional man in midfield with Akinola and Salah and Patino adds kind of this rigid structure with 2 hot strikers in Biereth and Balogun. Now, the question I have with the system is that a lot of the time, clubs like to see the system that's used at youth level translate to what happens in the first team so the teams and players can transition. But that it's very different to the Arsenal first team. Do you think there's any negatives, or is it still just positive seeing it being so successful?
I don't think so, because I think there's positives in the sense that there's a winning run and a winning mentality that's being created, which will serve these players really well in the first team. And I also think there's elements of the systems that Arteta is using at the minute. He's not every game, but at times developing this 4-3-3, and there are elements of the systems that can mirror each other in terms of the fullbacks getting very high. We know he likes Kieran Tierney to operate very high, and people will step in to cover those defensive responsibilities. So there's that resemblance there, and we have that midfield 3 that will kind of your 6 that holds and your 2 8s that are going up and down. So it kind of mirrors some of those positions. So I think and maybe there's some of that Betsy has in mind as well, that seeing what's going on with the first team and thinking this is where these players can make an impact and I can best develop them. So I think there's some thought that's gone into that, which sort of ticks all the boxes, if that makes sense. And so I think there's a lot of positives that can be taken from the new system, and I think that can be taken forward into the first team when these players do, or if they get those opportunities.
Lastly, on things as a whole, do you think this is sustainable? Like, obviously, last season, Arsenal were not this good in the youth league, and they just survived relegation. I think it was on the final day, wasn't it? And now they're up and they've gone to Manchester City, who, as we say, have this amazing academy that they're bringing through all these amazing talents. And that they get that 2-2 draw. They absolutely smash Chelsea. And one of the funniest commentaries I've ever listened to with the Chelsea commentary was hilarious.
Yeah, it was.
It was brilliant to listen to. Just how you can make a 6-1 not deserved. Listen to the Chelsea commentary because it's great. But
we still have those goals with 10 men as well, and it still apparently flattered us.
But yeah, how sustainable do you think it is with these players in the team? You mentioned that Balogun's obviously above this level and should really be playing first team football, and he may leave. And if he does, do you think that would have a big detrimental impact on how good they've been so far?
It's possible, because I think you've got to look at an under-23 season in 2 halves, really. You've got to think about getting to January, and a lot of things change at that point. You've got a lot of players that will possibly leave on loan. If you look at the likes of Lopez, Balogun, possibly even someone like Akinola, who we thought would leave on loan before. There's a lot of players we thought would go, and it didn't quite work out for them. The move didn't materialize. So you'd expect that would probably happen in January. So it's kind of common to have one team from August to January, and then sort of have a new look team that comes in January, where maybe a lot of under 18s will step up and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to judge it in a way, but really, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be sustainable in terms of the quality we have, because we've got great players coming in from the under 18s. We've got great players on the bench at the minute for the under-23s that are struggling to get a game. If you look at Ben Cottrell, what a fantastic young player he is, and he can't get in this team at the minute. We've got a plethora of central midfielders waiting to break into the under-23s, Bandiera and Jack Henry Francis, players like that are waiting for that opportunity and ready to step up. So if one of the others would leave, I'd be confident that they could step up and make an impact. And at the minute, when Balogun's there, he's starting with Biereth, and it's looking a really potent attack. But you would imagine when Balogun, whether he leaves on loan or whether he steps and makes more of an impact in the first team, you would imagine that Kedo Taylor-Hart and Amari Hutchinson would be the ones to step in. And it's nice for them that already this season they've had their moments. They've had some great games. I mean, Kedo got his brace against Spurs, and I think Amari's got that wonder goal against Palace. So I think they're there ready to take over when needs be. So I think it's a strong squad, and I think that's something we didn't necessarily have last season. I think we had some talented players, but didn't necessarily have a strong squad. Strong squad's not something you associate with under-23 teams. We've got a lot of players in there. Probably some do need to be moved on loan and would have been if they could have been.
Yeah.
But we do have a good squad, so I think that quality can be replicated across the squad.
It's amazing when we think about, we were talking about players like Amari Hutchinson and Kedo Taylor-Hart, and they're not getting in the side at the moment. And you said they're on the bench. It is mad. And whilst it's good and bad, you want to see them players playing. And there was a lot of hope around, and there still is around those players, especially Hutchinson and Kedo Taylor-Hart, as we say. Kedo Taylor-Hart signed that new contract this summer, and we hope that we'll see more of him. And the last thing, I suppose, without going into, well, I suppose it does link quite nicely into more of the specifics, but when you see the players like Charlie Patino getting so much hype, and then we have a League Cup game, because we've got no European football this season, which does restrict the opportunities for some of those players. I mean, if we'd have got into that Europa Conference League, there would have been loads. I mean, Spurs are playing Mura tonight. Like, you'd imagine that they would have played that game. And that's irritating, I suppose, for them to lose out on those chances. But what's probably more irritating is that when their League Cup game against a lower league opposition side like Wimbledon comes around and no youth players are involved at all, not even on the bench, that, from your perspective as someone who ingrained yourself massively with the youth football, was that frustrating to see, or did you understand the decision?
A little bit of both, I think. There never would have been a better time to put Charlie Patino in that position than that game. I mean, there was no stream of the game anywhere, was there? So, so there was no kind of massive pressure on him other than the people in the stadium. So it would have been an ideal opportunity for him to make that step up. And the way I look at it, I think, the Carabao Cup is a route into Europe, so we've got to think about that as a priority. And I think Thomas Partey had obviously said to Arteta that he wanted to play and he wanted to build his fitness up. And that was a big deciding factor. And I don't think Partey would have played if he'd not made that request. I think Arteta would have wrapped him in cotton wool, and I think we would have seen Charlie on the bench. So I think that was a big factor in why Charlie didn't play. I think Mikel acknowledged after the game Charlie was well in with a chance of making the team, and he trained really well. And by all accounts, they've been really pleased with how he's trained within the first team training, and he's adapted really well. And I think that's some of the reasoning why they've always been adamant that he's not going to be a player who leaves on loan. He's going to be a player that stays with Arsenal and develops and steps up, just like Bukayo Saka did, because he's a very adaptable player who seems to be able to just adapt to every scenario he's in, every environment he's in. And I think they've been really enthused about how he has adapted to first team training. So it seemed like a brilliant opportunity to play him, but I sort of understand the reasons why he didn't. And when you look at Partey played in that game to build up a bit of fitness, and then we played Spurs at the weekend, and I thought he was incredible. It sort of makes sense when you think of it in that context.
I really look forward to seeing, hopefully, especially during the festive period, maybe during the African Cup of Nations period, where we are a little bit light if there is chance for these guys to just be on the bench, because if Arsenal go 2-3 goals up, there's always that scope to give a player a chance and just to come off the bench for 10 minutes. And it's so key. It's so integral to a player's development to get as much time and exposure with those senior players in senior football as possible. Obviously, we've seen a lot of players go out on loan this summer. Nikolai Moller went to Victoria Köln in the third tier of German football. We just discussed him off air, and he's had an issue at the moment with his injury, which has kept him out. But in his absence, at Arsenal, Mika Biereth came in and has played a lot with following Balogun. He was the highest scoring player in the under 18s league last year for Fulham. Has he translated that goal scoring might into the under 23s table?
Yeah, he has. He's really impressed me. He's a really clever player. His movement off the ball is fantastic. And remember the last time we did a tactical breakdown, we talked about what people describe as tapping merchants and how I always take great offense to that, because a player like Mika is the timing of his movement, the intelligence of his movement enables him to be in the right place at the right time. And this is how he scores a lot of his goals. And he's just really impressed me that way. And I think the goal that he scored against, I think it was Chelsea in the 6-1 win, where Balogun played that amazing crossfield pass. I didn't even know he had that in his locker, but what pass that was.
But
he
finish.
He just hung on the defender and provided that kind of back post volley, which was such a delicate little finish. It was beautiful. And he looks like that player who's capable of many different finishes, whether it's sort of he's on the line and he's tapping in, or whether he's volleying from distance, whether he's heading it in. He seems like he's got a variety to his finishes, and he's impressed me a lot. And for some reason, I don't know why, he reminds me of Eduardo da Silva, just because he was the same way and such a clever player and such a clever mover and brilliant finisher. And we were sort of obviously robbed of him fulfilling that with us, but we saw sort of glimpses of his brilliance, and Mika just reminds me of that type of player. But yeah, excited to see how many goals he scores. Forgive me, I don't actually know how many he's scored so far this season, but
just checking myself earlier. I quickly go on here. He's got 4 in 6 so far, according to PL2 on the Transfermarkt's website. Although sometimes they miss a couple of games on there, but it looks like he got the hat trick against Chelsea. He scored against Palace in the 23s. Do you remember him scoring any others? Because I know that Transfermarkt can miss out some of them sometimes.
I think he scored in the Palace game. I think he might have got his first goal in the Palace game. Yeah. So I mean, there you go. He's impressing plenty, and I think when it comes down to that area of the pitch, it's going to be really hard to get in to the senior side with Balogun already ahead of him and playing, of course, in the under 23s. And Nketiah and Lacazette, we expect to move on, but then we expect Arsenal to probably go out and sign a striker in 2022, which could prevent them from moving in. In the chat box, Pramod says, can you cover the goalkeeper situation as well? Really interested to see if there's someone who can step in if Leno rumours seem to be true. I thought Hein was decent during pre-season. Hein, of course, signed that new deal ever so recently as well, which was a little bit of a surprise from what I heard from people around the club. So talk about that. I was really surprised to see him sign a new deal, because you can see the quality of the goalkeepers that are in front of him. Okonkwo is really highly rated at the club, and seemed to have been promoted to that third spot. Aaron Ramsdale has come in, and who doesn't love Aaron Ramsdale now? He's a hero. So it was surprising to me that he signed a new deal, because he's gotten that sort of buzz from playing international football, and there is he's gotten people talking about him, and I think he could have got himself a move somewhere quite decent easily if he wanted to. But luckily for us, it's a great problem for us to have, for him to sign a new deal and go into the mix of having loads of good goalkeepers, which is unbelievable. When was the last time we had this many good goalkeepers? It's hard to fathom, but he's an impressive keeper. I think he's developed really well in the last year or so. When he first got here, he was very raw, and you would see a lot of mistakes from him, but he seems to have done really well with the exposure he's got in international football, and it's helped him develop. And he's done well when called upon in the under-23s, and it's hard to sort of pick between him and Okonkwo. Really, they're both really talented, and it's, you know, I think if Hines not officially promoted, but he was, I think he was on the bench the other day, wasn't he? As a, or maybe a 19th man, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he was something like that. Yeah, because I think there was an injury or something, but yeah, he was involved.
Yeah. So he seems to be getting those opportunities as well as Okonkwo. So it's hard to sort of pick between them at the minute. It's a great.
I think Okonkwo would have thought himself pretty comfortable when he signed that deal, thinking, "I've got this third place Arsenal goalkeeper slot now down." But Hines gone, "Nope, sorry, I'm still here." And I mean, the fact that he's now an Estonian full international, he's played games for them multiple times, playing in international breaks, is such a big experience point and a big big boost for him.
Yeah, I think it was the game against Wales, wasn't it, where he had a fantastic game and Bale just couldn't get by him at all, and that was great to see.
Really good.
I think really in January one of them has to go on loan. I don't think we can be in a position in January where both Hein and Okonkwo are not playing regular football, because they're both good keepers that need that experience. So I think one of them has to go on loan, but don't ask me which will. We're not sure.
Which will? No, I think that obviously we've seen sides. I mean, currently at Portsmouth, Gavin Bazunu, the 19-year-olds at Portsmouth. I mean, I was at the Charlton game the other day because my other half's a big Charlton fan. I was there. I claimed I was on a Mega Laziz scouting trip, but he, of course, didn't come on because he's not really getting too many minutes. Now he's suffered with a groin problem, so he's going to be out for a bit. And it's a little bit of a concern how few minutes he's actually getting already. And I know he's only 19, but you need to be sending these players out on loan places. And people were talking about him being good enough to get a championship loan, and he's not getting minutes for Portsmouth, who are down the bottom end of the league. I mean, just briefly on, are you concerned about that at all?
Well, I actually liked the way it was going so far. He played the first game for Portsmouth, didn't he? And I don't think he had a great time. I think he was played quite further forward than he's used to playing. And yeah, which would have been, you know, very different from him. I can't recall him playing there too many times for Arsenal. But I think I quite liked that was difficult for him, because what that does is shows him this is the level you need to aspire to. This is what you have to attain. And that's really good to have that to aim for a young player, and for him to understand that this is the level. And from that point, he'd gone and trained really hard. I think Cowley had said in the press that he was training really well, and then unfortunately he picks up an injury, which is sort of quite normal, I think, for young players who are sort of having an introduction to senior football, that, you know, the intensiveness of first team training can get those injuries that come up. So I think it's sort of normal that that's happened, but it's a shame, because I think from the way he would have trained and adapted to that level he needed to get to, and I think he would have broke into the team, and I think Cowley knew that, and it was a sort of game of being patient with him and letting him adapt and letting him find those levels. And so it's a shame that the injury has interrupted that, and I've not heard how long it's going to be yet.
I'm still waiting for confirmation from our colleagues over at Hampshire Live. They haven't yet given any kind of background, and neither has Portsmouth so far. We just know that he had a scan this week, and they're still waiting for kind of the situation. PAPP in the chat says, is there a player in the academy that can replace a 6'3" Pablo Mari at centre back, left footed, in that type of mold? Daniel Robert has asked for opinions on Zayn. Now, is he? It sounds a French surname for me to say Monloir, but is it just Monlouis?
Monlouis, I think. Yeah.
And Dan says he suggests that Zayn could be that guy to come into the team. He's only 17, but I've then genuinely not really heard much about him at all prior to this season.
He was thrown in there last season, and he had a difficult time, and it was very raw for him. He was playing well above his age group, and I think it was a learning curve, and I think he's still in that learning curve, to be fair. He's still sort of finding his feet, and now he's got a new centre-back partner with Rekic, and I think it's still early days for him, and I think we've just got to see how he gets on, but he's got a lot of, he's fantastic on the ball, and it's almost a little bit like William Saliba, where he's brilliant on the ball, but it's about learning when to take that risk. When's the right time to come out with the ball, when's the right time to play that pass, and it's you get that through experience, don't you? And so I think it's sort of time will tell with Zayn whether we can do that. In terms of Pablo Mari, I think a prime candidate, if we're talking about a left-footed centre back, then Mazida Gungbo would probably be the one. And he's sort of really impressed me this season. And if you look at last season, he was played a lot at left back, and he looked to me like a left-footed centre back playing at left back. It just didn't quite fit. But there also have been times when he's played in a 2 and it hasn't quite worked out as well. But playing in a back 3 and playing on the left-hand side of that back 3 has really suited him. And he's looked fantastic this season. And I think he's a strength of his is stepping up and winning the ball, and he's shown time and time again he can do that, and he's quite good on the ball. And I think playing him at left back improved him on the ball as well, so that was a positive to come out of that, even though the performances didn't always match. But he's shown he's been able to put all that together. Now he's at left centre back and a back 3, and I've been impressed by him. So he's had a good season so far, and I think he played a big part in one of the goals we scored against Chelsea, where I think he robbed the ball on the halfway line, and then Charlie Patino took over and threaded it through to Balogun, who does what he does best. And so I've been impressed, and he might be the one that can be that Pablo Mari replacement. Who knows?
Who knows? We will wait and see. SK says, can Arsenal recall players or give the club some friendly advice if their players are constantly played out of position? Arsenal are expecting to play in a regular base. In regards to Aziz, as far as I'm aware, there is a recall clause in his deal. As Danny Cowley was moaning about, most of the players that he gets online have recall clauses put into their contracts. We've obviously seen it happen with Eddie Nketiah. Leeds was recalled. It's still very early, but what I am aware is that the less and the least that he plays, Aziz, the concerns will grow, and the likelihood of a recall will happen. I've actually got a piece on FL coming out tomorrow about that, so we'll link that to you guys so you can read it. Kind of lastly, I wanted to end with the headline act, which is obviously Mr. Charlie Patino.
Yeah,
he the hype around him just continues. The disappointment throughout the fan base when he wasn't in the squad for Wimbledon was just exponential. I haven't caught up with you since the start of the season, so it's a simple question to ask: is the hype warranted, and is he genuinely as good as what everyone seems to be making out?
The hype is absolutely warranted. He's a fantastic player, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because this sort of scenario really brought up a lot of lively debates about hyping players and whether that was right or wrong, and whether that puts too much pressure on a player. And I think that's somewhat ironic, because the argument was this is putting too much pressure on Charlie. But if you look at on the field, evading pressure is what Charlie Patino does best. That's one of his best qualities.
Yeah.
And looking at the way Per Mertesacker has sort of molded his academy, it's very much to support players the best they can to be the best human beings they can, and to be as resilient as they can. And it's, I think we've seen that with Bukayo Saka and Emile Smith-Rowe. They feel we see them, and it's like they can hold the world on their shoulders. They're so resilient, and they're so unfazed by everything. And I think that's what Arsenal will try and build with Charlie. So I don't think hyping players is putting too much pressure on them. And that's what I was going round about the houses to try and say. But, so I think the hype is warranted, and I think hype and encouragement of young players is a good thing. And I don't see it as something that we should keep quiet about. I think it's positive that we're all talking about Charlie Patino and encouraging him and talking about how good he is, because boy, he's really good. I mean, he has that, the way he traps the ball and has that sort of 360 turn is unbelievable. And I've likened it to Frankie de Jong several times. It always reminds me of that. And I know people automatically want to go to that Jack Wilshere comparison, but it's not, and there is the left foot, and they do both like to travel with the ball, but I always think of Frankie de Jong. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right there, but I'm sure everyone knows what I mean.
All of our Dutch listeners go, for goodness sake, Kev, sort yourself out.
Absolutely. Apologies to any Dutch people out there, but it always reminds me of Frankie immediately, because they've just got that quality on the ball and in the way they sort of that first touch. What strikes me with Charlie is every touch is so considered and so measured. There's a plan for every touch he has on the ball, and he's just a player, and that kind of technical quality, sooner or later that will translate into senior football. It's a matter of when, not if, and that's what we probably need to do in terms of not putting too much pressure and rushing him. It'll happen when it happens. When Charlie and Mikel think it's ready to happen, and we just sort of have to accept that, as frustrating as it might be sometimes, but it's definitely a matter of when, not if. He's a superb young player, and he's proven it week in, week out, and he's even surprising us by, I'm a big fan of his quality, but the goal he scored against Man United was superb, and for him to put, Phil Jones and Mengi and Dean Henderson, he sat them all down and finished superbly. And I've not seen him score that type of goal too many times, and it was just incredible. So I'm a big fan, and I patiently look forward to seeing what he does for Arsenal in the future.
Yeah, it's exciting times, and it'll be one that we will eagerly await. If you're as excited about Charlie Patino as we are, then make sure you've already hit the like button on today's show and subscribe to the Gooner Talk if you haven't, of course, already. And thank you for tuning in today. Kev, thank you ever so much for giving us all the insight in the last couple of months of Arsenal youth action as they run towards a very clear and obvious title win, despite just being 6 or 7 games into the season already. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
You can check out Kev at Scouting Indoors, or by typing in Next Generation Arsenal into your Twitter feed if you want to keep up to date with all of the latest Arsenal youth info. And you'll be able to find Kev joining me once again at the end of next month to discuss how Arsenal's title challenges completely collapsed and fallen into oblivion. We will see you again very, very soon. In fact, I'll see you later on this evening for the preview of the Brighton game this weekend with a few of the members. See you soon, guys. A fantastic evening, and as always, up the Arsenal.